Welcome to the Black Duck Revival Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Wilkins. I'm excited to have you join me as I speak with a fascinating collection of folks, all of whom have in common that they've made a way for themselves by finding an intersection between thoughtful consideration and the tactile work of getting their hands dirty. This is an examination of intention, capability, and craft. It's where philosophy meets the blue-collar work ethic and where I find real value. Hey folks, welcome back to the Black Duck Revival Podcast. This week I am joined by Rue Mapp. Rue is the founder and CEO of Outdoor Afro. She is a community leader, she's a grassroots organizer, and most of all, and how I think of her, is a mentor and a friend. Rue is one of the most erudite, savvy, powerful women that I've ever met, and it's kind of interesting to be in her orbit and to get to watch her and absorb, skills and knowledge through her example, but also to be able to talk to her and have these really deep, meaningful conversations and experience her willingness to share her knowledge and her experience and kind of help steer you and give you some direction. As some of us kind of come into this outdoor space, start dealing with bigger players, corporate entities, and the like. So I got to be on a hunt with Rue a few weeks back. We recorded this interview. I'll go more into detail about what we were doing there and some more of Rue's accolades, but I'm excited for you guys to get to listen to her and for us to have this really frank conversation. It talks a little bit about her history, what she's bringing to the outdoor industry and the hunting space. And I just really, really love and like and appreciate this person. So please enjoy this episode with Rue Mapp. So I am sitting at the Grizzly Ranch in Suisun, California, kind of west of Sacramento a ways. I get a little bit like halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here with Rue Mapp, who is the orchestrator of an event I've been at this weekend called the Black Heritage Hunt in partnership with Cal Waterfowl. Basically, it's been a really, really rad hunt where there's this amazing facility that Cal Waterfowl owns. I guess previously it was owned by the owner of the Oakland A's. So it's kind of like this rich guy paradise that was kind of frozen in time at, 1981. And so I love the personality of the place. The clubhouse is this big mushroom-shaped tower in the middle of this huge, expansive marsh, and it's wrapped in windows. You can walk around outside on this veranda. Really, really impressive place. Tons of personality, and being that I'm from Arkansas, kind of mind-blowing that people have access to a place like this. But Rue, thank you so much for having me out. I met you last year, and then you invited me out to this deal, and it was fun as hell.
Oh, well, I'm just so glad that you're here. Thank you for having me in this conversation. We've been having a lot of conversations this weekend, and so it's great to end the weekend, to just look back over the last couple of days and maybe pick up on where some of our last conversations left off.
Mm-hmm. So quick introduction. Rue is are you the CEO, the president?
Founder
of Outdoor Afro, which Rue, you've done this a million times. Why don't you just throw it down?
Well, Outdoor Afro started as a blog on my heart in 2009, and I grew it bit by bit to be a national not-for-profit organization. And it is all about celebrating and inspiring Black leadership and connections in the outdoors. And the way we do it is through a leadership team that we train. We have now in this year's class over 100 men and women who are residing in 33 states. And we have a participation network of nearly 60,000 people who get out and hike and bike and camp and just do all kinds of things in the outdoors that Black people have always done, but maybe there was some kind of disconnection in your life with your family. And so we tell you how to do things, show you where to go, the gear you need, and really help to empower people so that people can have that sense of outdoor leadership and agency restored back into their own homes and into their own families. So it has really been a powerful journey for me, because Outdoor Afro didn't just start off as some entrepreneurial idea. It was really about celebrating my parents and how they always had their arms open wide to people. We had a ranch ourselves about 70 miles east of here. And that was a place of pure hospitality, of where it was where, I learned about hunting and fishing, but we also had a swimming pool and a tennis court. And so we had like all this outdoor recreation at our fingertips. And I got to see the importance of sharing it with others and helping other people feel welcomed, and the awe that people could experience no matter how old they were. And so Outdoor Afro is like an expansion of what I grew up with. And my parents are no longer living. And so it's the living tribute to them and who they were.
And we've talked about this a little bit before, but did your dad come from Texas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my dad was from Texas, mom from Louisiana. They were, so
it's like that Beyonce song.
Right. And I'm a first generation Californian. Mm-hmm. So I am heavily influenced by my upbringing, by the South, and from the food to, sitting at the feet of elders, the way that we, show respect, very deeply religious, going to church on Sundays, Sunday dinner. So much of who my parents were and what they put in me is actually very Southern. And so, and my parents were much older than most of my friends' parents. And so I kind of have always had this and been teased to have kind of a country way about me. Mm-hmm. But it's something that I treasure and I love, and I love it when I go to the South, because there's a recognition of who I am in those places that's, very different than what I might experience here in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah. So you grew up, we're talking like Bay Area. This is a strange juxtaposition, but it's actually one that makes a lot of sense, because for hundreds of years, most of the black people in this country were in the South, living in the country in these rural areas, this agrarian connection to land. And then, it's really been like the last 100 years where there's kind of this expulsion or expansion of black people, fleeing violence and looking for better work opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so like what I've seen is that most of the black folks on the West Coast that I've encountered, they're like one or two generations out of three places, which is Arkansas, Louisiana, or Texas.
That's right.
And that's because that's where the railroads went.
Yep. And this is where it stopped.
Yeah. And then the people from the other side of the South, they went straight up. And I've talked about this on the podcast
That's
before.
right.
So yeah, it's, Bay Area, we're talking like what, E40 and
mm-hmm.
like
Too Short.
Yeah. Like kind of raw hip hop too, like mm-hmm. But that weird juxtaposition like you're talking about.
And activism.
Yeah. Berkeley, the W. Kwamu Bells of the world.
Huey Newton.
Yeah.
So
that's the Panthers came out of there, didn't
mm-hmm. they? Yeah, and his parents were a part of the Great Migration. So in the Great Migration, people often bookended around the wars, and it was a huge swell of people coming because they had the shipyard work. Those greatly available for black men and black women. But the actual migration period went all the way through the early 70s. And so I'm sure you're familiar with Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns. And I turned to that book as soon as it came out because it was something I felt I could find and get, I guess, confirmation on about the motivation for why people migrated. Because migration sounds like it sounds like a choice, like there's some agency about it that's detached from a motivation. And in that book really helped me to understand that people were like leaving in the cover of night. Okay. They were leaving the cover of night because, there was terror, there was, financial pressure, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, refugees in many ways, like within their own country.
Absolutely. And I think we should call it that, and not, have this like great migration, like it was some kind of pilgrimage, because people were not necessarily coming to a place that they knew. They came here to start all over. And so what I find in California especially, and I think that spirit remains, there's something about the way that this state the whole landscape is informed by seismic activity. Okay. So that's why we have, these incredible mountain ranges, and we've got the Central Valley, which we're, presently sitting at the edge of here in Sassoon. And then we have, these, jagged coastal edges and shorelines.
Is this agricultural where we're at now? Is that what most of the industry?
Yes, it's agricultural. And it could have easily have been developed, like so much of the agricultural lands that surround this area. But it was preserved. It was preserved, and its watershed and tidal marsh, have been preserved. But in any case, I think that there's something because of this movement that is California. It gives easy birth to, people who think they can strike it rich, get famous, be someone else. So there's something about the landscape that also informs like how people show up in the state.
That's an interesting take on it. What I've kind of realized, this is slightly off topic, but I've spent most of my time the last decade in Arkansas, and I realized that this is the first time I've ever been in California, and I realized that I have absolute kind of predispositions towards California, especially because like where I live, I think California is used as this example of the antithesis, right? And not even necessarily by people that I, value, whose opinion I value or that I like or respect. It's just kind of, that whole, or that shorthand like Hollywood or whatever. And of course, California is really, really long and really, really big and incredibly varied.
Yes.
You're talking about, especially when we're talking about how the environment informs the people and what they do and how they consider the world. There's a lot of variance in that in California. It's not just Southern California where media's rooted at.
Or tech.
Yeah. It's really been kind of like a fascinating little snapshot of the place. And it's interesting that there is it's interesting that there's such a deep-rooted hunting culture here. I think most people wouldn't think about the fact, and I believe this statistic is correct, is that California kills more ducks than anywhere in the country. Now, per capita, I think the hunters to non-hunters is much lower than where I live. But as far as there's so many people and there's so much rural land and there's so much access that, there's a lot of hunting that happens here.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just described has been illustrated through my own experiences, like traveling out of California to go hunting. And there was a time, I would say maybe a decade or so ago, maybe even longer, when if you said that you were from California, people would light up. There was something exciting about being from California.
It was shiny. Yeah.
Yeah. that shine has dimmed, unfortunately. And I could speculate as to why, but it's been a fascinating journey to be a hunter, to go outside of California and practice hunting, where people are often surprised that I hunt. Even though I've talked about it my whole career with Outdoor Afro about my family background, but it's only been truly in the last few years that I've dug in and gotten
actively participated,
reborn, as I like to say.
Did you grow? This sounds so crude, but did you grow up killing stuff?
Little stuff like quail, squirrel, but that was it. No
small game hunting, but you grew up small game hunting.
Yeah, that was me. But my dad, he would take down deer, and it was so heartwarming to have posted about my hunting. And there was a family friend who responded and said, "Oh, it's great to see you're keeping up the tradition in your family." And I was like, say more about that, because I didn't know what his connection was specifically. And he said, yeah, your dad took me and got me on my first deer and helped me break it down. And I was like, wow, like I didn't, know that or didn't. I knew he was hunting, but I didn't know that he was acting in a mentor role for other people in the community in that way. And we also had domestic animals. So there was killing of domestic animals and processing of those domestic animals. And I had a bigger hand in that because things were fairly divided, along gender lines. So guys went out and hunted, and the women processed it. So I was definitely involved with a lot of processing, canning, shelling. I just remember sitting at the table. We'd go, even here. So we had two houses, but one ranch, and then we had a house in Oakland. And my parents would still, drive to the Central Valley and go to these U-pick farms and pick peas all day. And I remember I was so little, that I lost my tennis shoe in the pea patch and came home with one shoe.
When you say peas, do you mean like
black-eyed peas?
Okay.
Yeah. And then I just remember just sitting at the kitchen table for what felt like hours, like shelling peas. And I remember getting really good at it, but I just remember oh, damn. And of course, I long for days like that, long to create times when you can just sit around a table and peel things and put them away in a sealable bag and, and be able to enjoy them later. So, yeah, so my family, really maximized, even if we weren't at our ranch, the areas that surrounded where we lived to get fresh things to eat.
I'm interested in, so your mom's from Louisiana, what part?
D. Ritter, which is probably closest to, let's see, I think it's Lake Charles, might be. So it's more on the southwestern side, and then he more on the eastern side of Texas, a little town near Beaumont.
Okay. And I've got this image in my mind that I've created of your father, but what was he doing in Texas? How old were they when they came over here? And how did they, you're saying you had multiple homes and a ranch. So it sounds like they were
doing pretty well.
Yeah, they're successful.
Yeah. There are people in our family who still wonder how my, family did what they did. And my dad was a hands on the land, hands on the tools guy. And he, by having children later in life, had an economic advantage over most of his siblings and her siblings, because they were, people were, having children, one after the other, from the time they were married, up until they couldn't anymore. And through, some health challenges. Today we'd call it infertility. They weren't able to, and so they got up at age and were able to stack their money. But the way that he was able to do it, and let me just set the table even further. My dad had a 6th grade education.
What year was he born?
He was born in 1914.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And but he was a carpenter. He was skilled. He was a skilled tradesman. And he actually went on and completed his education later in life and got a teaching credential. And he was assisting at the trade school at the local community college where he retired from. But he was a builder. And so the ranch really was like a little shack on 14 acres. He built, out a house, a modest ranch house. He built the swimming pool. He built the barn, the shop, all the things that we came to enjoy. And I remember, and he built the smokehouse, so when we go and, kill things, he was real big on smoking things. And so he built my first bed. So he was a man's man. I mean, there's no better way to describe him. He had his chair that he laid on, at the end of his long days. He got up oftentimes before the sun came up. He was always tinkering with things, building things, and he ended up just making some really smart decisions around real estate, buying land and building on them. And at their peak, he had built 3 apartment houses. And these apartment houses had 6 to 8 units. They weren't, huge. They were tucked away in neighborhoods and multi-use neighborhoods. Not necessarily the greatest parts of town, but not like the slums either.
Just working class people.
Working class people. And so I grew up, running up the stairs to collect the rent. I mean, and so I was a part of, the economy of the household. I knew where the money came from. And then my mom, she was a seamstress. And so she would make the money that she wanted to make by making clothes for other people. And most of the people who were her customers were people from the church. And they were both fairly active, my mom more so, in the Church of God in Christ. And, every year they have the annual convocation. So, she had...
I don't know anything. I've never even heard of that denomination before.
Yeah, it's a Church of God in Christ, or Kojic. And that's also a whole other part of what shaped me also. Because, being a part of the church community for her, that was her social network, and so we were there, and it was and it remains to this day, I believe, not just the Church of God in Christ, but church in general remains a place where Black women can have status in a way that is, celebrated and respected. So, for instance, the pastor's wife is the first lady. Women, get to go up in rank and be missionaries. They get to be ushers. And let me tell you something, those ushers are like...
It's like white gloves.
The white gloves, the uniform.
Yeah, the hats, like the little pill hats.
Yeah, I don't remember the hats, but I do remember, they wore a badge that said usher, okay? And there was lace and... just a bit of, it was importance. You're basically kind of the sergeant at arms.
They had a uniform, it sounds like.
You had a uniform, and you kept order. If somebody was chewing gum in the church, usher would come over and put her hand out with a napkin, spit it out. Or if a woman got too happy, filled with the Holy Spirit, and fell on the floor, usher would come with a sheet and throw it on her legs so that she wouldn't inadvertently
keep her modesty.
Yeah, she would inadvertently, expose herself. I mean, so there was just that kind of decorum and celebration also of what I believe is also Blackness and Africanness, where someone can sing a song or play the tambourine in a certain way, and the Holy Spirit just sweeps over the whole congregation. And whatever the program was, it doesn't matter. Like there was, and I used to, of course, hate it when I was a kid because I knew it meant we'd be in church all day. But like people would get so happy and so joy filled that, the pastor would be like, we're going to throw the program out the window.
Is this like, do you like go to church on Wednesday and then go to like at night and then you go to church, then you got Bible study and then you go on Sunday?
Yeah. So I would say on the spectrum of like, strict attendance versus kind of loose attendance, I'd say our family was somewhere in the middle. I have cousins who never missed church and had to go to church multiple days a week, including Sunday. I had Sunday was a day of obligation throughout my childhood. And then we also would go on Tuesdays for what was called Bible Band. And it was just, mainly prayer and meditation, and the pastor would come up and say a word. And I remember those evenings fondly because, I'd be in there always like with a book or notepad, I'd be doing different things. Cause these are adults talking,
Yeah.
So, and then we'd stop, often late. And as a treat, I'd get a bag of Funyuns and a strawberry crush, and just that would make it all worth it for me. But we were definitely like not. And then once I got to be in my teen years, there was no making me go to church. After that, I was trying to, have as much time to myself as possible. But I will say that, those are experiences that greatly influenced me in particular. So I can't sing, and I'm a passable dancer. Okay, now I'm at my age, most of my dancing's in my facial expressions.
Just kind of grown folks.
It's
stuff.
all squinting and contorting my mouth, and
That's funny. No, I know exactly.
It's all in the face now. But in any case, but the thing I could do, I could talk. And so when it was time to read anything, if someone wanted something read at church and they wanted it read really well done, like on the Easter program or someone's obituary, and even to this day, I get the call. And that was something that trained me to be a public speaker from a very young age, and feel confident in doing it. And, I come from a kind of a family where whatever your talent is, it's going to be put on blast. And that's if you can sing, or if you can cook, or if you can, whatever you can do, people are going to keep coming to the well, and you will get better at it. And that's kind of how it went with my family. And I'm grateful that they put me up in front of the church, and I'd be petrified at 7 years old, but it prepared me for a career that involves quite a bit of public speaking.
So let me actually segue off of that. Actually, no, I want to ask you one question.
Sure.
And then I want to move into a little bit more of like some of the activities we participated in this weekend, and ask you some questions about kind of this juxtaposition of maybe how you present and what you do. All right. So, what did your parents' hands look like?
My dad had the hands of a man who worked them. They were big. He was tall. He was 6'4", very muscular, lean until he got older and got a little belly. But his hands, I remember, were just so big, and hands that worked. And I just, what comes to mind is a hammer. Like I just have a very vivid memory of him having a hammer often. My mom's hands, not so much. weathered, definitely weathered, but not hardened like his were. His hands were hardened.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking this is because both of the descriptions you gave of your parents and what they did, like your mother being a seamstress, right? And you're talking about your father being a carpenter. These are both very, in different ways, very physical, tactile jobs, right?
Yep.
Very hand-oriented. And it's like, I bet you can't, I imagine that a seamstress is going to, develop maybe in just a couple specific places, but like some very astute calluses, some resiliency with that needle.
Yeah, I remember. Yep. Yes.
And then you have with carpentry, and I'm thinking about like my grandfather's hands. There's this just kind of overall hardness that develops, like the fingertips kind of round out and blunt, from like just weathering and hitting and callousing. And it's, I was thinking about it because I'm like sitting here while you're talking, I'm looking at your hands, and you have, you're a put together lady, right? So but I understand the relationship to it, right? And the fact that you have, you have a relationship with, like an intimate relationship with people whose hands were influenced by the physical work they did, right? Which is, even though, and I talked about it, like we talked about it last night, you're very much in a corporate world, but you have that relationship with like physical capability. And so I didn't even tell you what this podcast is about. This podcast is about people who have found an intersection of thoughtfulness and thinking through things and like having a tactile relationship with physical activity and like getting their hands dirty, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that was kind of just out of nowhere, but I've been sitting here for like 15 minutes looking at your hands, and you have like, manicured nails, and like when you were hunting the other day, I told you like I've never seen anybody wear lipstick and go hunting, but yeah, so what's interesting to me is that you've kind of had a reactivation, let's say in the last 5 years or so in hunting, and you're kind of bebopping all over the place. You're bird hunting, you're waterfowl hunting here, and you were just doing some upland stuff, and you were antelope hunting, and did you say you killed a whitetail, right?
Yep.
Yeah, whitetail hunting. And so I'd be interested to know how doing that stuff is kind of informing your corporate work. How is that tactile business that you're in, how is that informing like kind of what you're doing for a living and this organization that you've built out? And
yeah, no, that's a great question, because I sometimes forget how much of a multi-hyphenate I am, and how it presents and can be disruptive in the way that it lands on individuals or circumstances I find myself in. But the truth is because my family did so well financially, I was able to live in a affluent neighborhood, went to school with affluent children, went to 3 elementary schools. Okay, so there was no bebopping, between houses, and lived in the same house from, a baby until I was 18. And that kind of stability, as well as access to high quality education, had me in 2 worlds kind of from the rip, where, we're speaking one way at home, but another way at school.
yeah.
And I remember getting reprimanded by the teacher because I pronounced something in the way that it was said at my house. And she's like, "What do you mean? It's not this, it's that." And so I got corrected from a young age, and kind of felt like I was bilingual and able to translate across, the very Southern family that I was living in and with and was from, to whatever the experiences were that I had. And it was tough because, again, my parents were so much older than most people's parents that, they weren't maybe as energetic and cool,
Sure.
and would, they weren't really interested, in doing some of the things that my friends' parents were doing, like Jack and Jill and the Lynx and all these other kind of things.
I don't know what either one of those are.
Yeah, so these are just not just, but incredibly important organizations for Black people who had means to find networks for their children to develop in. So Jack and Jill it's a mom's group, and it's been around, for nearly a century. And there's other organizations like it, sororal and fraternal organizations.
Okay.
We can just, kind of have a general grouping. And I mean, no disrespect by, speaking on these organizations with any kind of poor description. But in general, my folks were just not interested in joining. They weren't interested in like shopping where, the white people shop. They wanted to shop in the hood. They wanted to go to Food King, where they could go and find the foods that they knew they could find, whether it be, crackling or, meat to season your greens. I mean, that they went.
You know exactly what it sounds like is an immigrant community.
Yeah.
It sounds like first generation immigrants who have kind of a cloistered community. They've built a little place that reminds them of where they came from.
Yep.
And their children become ambassadors to kind of the rest of the world.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about language. You're talking about food.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So that's the experience I had growing up. And so what you see in me is really what I feel a course correction to be all the parts of who I am.
Yeah.
And not, because to be, and you describe it as corporate, it's a lot of leaving things at the door. It's a lot of leaving parts of who you are, someplace where you don't have to talk about it, or you don't want to talk about it, or that the company that you're keeping is not interested in it, or worse, would ridicule you for it. And that's one reason why I get so much energy from doing the work that I do, is because it allows me to be fully expressed. And I've never done anything in my life. And I've had corporate jobs pretty much since I was in my, early 20s, all the way through my mid 30s. And I benefited greatly from those experiences. And I was able to make a good living from those experiences. But I always knew there was something else I was supposed to do. And when Outdoor Afro began as a blog, it just quickly became my navigational north. Like, I knew it was almost like a spiritual or generational like tug. Like, this is what you got to do. And I was so happy to do it. And just as broke, like, there was no money getting made on Outdoor Afro. It was this idea. But I remember when I would tell people about it, and I would tell people about it like waiting in line at a book signing. Yeah, I do Outdoor Afro, and this is what it's all about. I didn't have a team. I didn't have anybody. It was just me, like this, evangelist for this idea of where Black people in nature meet. And I remember when I would tell people what I did, there was something that would light up. And I think it was a reflection of how I was lit up, and there was a woman, I was taking a class and I told her I had started Outdoor Afro, and she looked at me. She's like, it's going to be big, and I mean, I can't say that I knew she was right, but are you good?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
There's some little weird noise in the background. I'm trying to tweak stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, let me know if you want me to.
No. It's like it's a little tiny thing. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize. I must have been making some weird face going like, what's going on?
Yeah, I just thought maybe we were like off or something.
No. Just keep on.
Yeah, this woman, she's like, it's, when I told her about it, and like, again, there was not a thing. Outdoor Afro was not a thing. It was just a blog. It was an idea. It was inspiration. She's like, it's going to be big. And I was like, hoping so. But I knew that that's what I needed to do. And I started getting other bits of inspiration. I remember going to a restaurant in San Francisco called Farmer Brown's. And I went into that restaurant, and it's a soul food restaurant. And this is, before everything became so like artisanal and, it's food trucky, trendy. Mm-hmm. But they were really on the cutting edge of like, saying this is soul food. We're going to celebrate it. And there was art, and there was like just great dishes and furniture that kind of, felt very Southern to me. And they were, serving the drinks out of mason jars and, things that are now like are very like Instagrammable. But at the time in 2009, I just felt like they were onto something that felt like full expression, of the artfulness and the nourishment of being Black in America. And so I remember writing in my journal at the time. I was like, being there is, it not only inspires me, to have, eaten there, but it's there's something about that place that's telling me what I need to be doing next. So it was just all this fertile ground at that time, this yearning in myself to be doing something. I was at a crossroads in my own life, which I won't really get into, around career and, raising 3 kids on my own after a divorce. And, it's kind of one of those, what do you have to lose moments, know?
Yeah.
Because everything you'd been doing up to this point hadn't worked to plan. You thought, going down this path was going to give you this outcome. Well, guess what? I didn't have the things that I thought I was going to have. And so I went back to school, finished up a degree that I had long neglected. And, what sat before me was, this kind of like crossroads moment. And that's, when Outdoor Afro was started as a blog. And it was really, and blogs were at the time like people's, digital journals. And I had been writing about nature my whole life. Like I had diaries, with locks on them, where I'd come back from the Girl Scout camp and write about every excruciating detail about, human interactions and the wildlife we saw and the activities that we did. And so I loved writing, not so much to like express myself, but it was a way for me to revisit those places again and those experiences again. It was almost like, for me, like writing in my journal, especially about my outdoor experiences, was like taking a picture, and looking through a photo album. So, so the blog is basically that diary grown up. And so I just I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? We're talking about something else. You asked me something else.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Maybe we can steer it this way. Because so Outdoor Afro, you've got people that are leading trips, like biking and nature walks and canoe trips and, stuff that I would probably classify as like outdoor recreation, right?
Absolutely.
And so even though I am definitely recreating when I'm hunting, me personally, I don't usually boat unless I'm trying to go like set a trap line or I'm trying to go get fish or find ducks, right?
Right.
I don't go on hikes. I, hump it down in hollers trying to find critters, right? So, and that said, that's me. I think there's value in people. Everyone's not going to be, Brown Daniel Boone or whatever. I'm not comparing myself to Daniel Boone.
No, you're teasing up something that.
Well, I want to know about. Let's talk about this hunt that we've been on this weekend because, look, we've got a lot of things that might on the surface, just in a snapshot, seem like there would be a lack of continuity between them, right? So we're in California, black people hunting, right? Also, like my buddy Patrick said, it's probably 50% women, right?
Yep.
If not more women than men.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of things that you might at first glance think don't go together. And this was all orchestrated by you. So I'd be interested in knowing what the impetus for this was and why you have incorporated, something that really is like an inherently violent act, an inherently visceral act, an inherently, participatory act into your life in such an intimate way.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, Outdoor Afro allowed me to be all the parts of who I am. But there was one more part that wanted, I believe, visibility in my life and in practice. And that was my dad. And I never felt that more strongly than when I killed my first turkey. And I was walking down the hill, these beautiful, lush, rolling woodlands in Sonoma County, hosted by Hunters of Color.
This is with Jimmy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he had Carlos with me, one of the founders, and Holly was with me. And we each got on our turkeys like within 20 minutes. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, they're thick over there, as I understand.
Well, I'd never, shot turkeys before, so consider me spoiled. But I was like bounding down the hill, just bopping down the hill with this Jake like slung over my shoulder. And I just felt like awash with my father's approval. And so, these activities are, yes, violent. And yes, complex. They're extractive.
Mm-hmm.
Just about an hour ago, before we came down to do this podcast, one of the participants was talking about a nature area that had just reopened. And she's like, yeah, and they're offering nature walks now. And I remember I looked at her and I said, I don't nature walk, I hunt.
Yeah.
And it was meant to be, kind of cheeky because of the weekend we're in. But I actually thought about that and wondered how I could ever go back personally, right, to only walking through a place and not noticing something I could kill. Like, I don't know if I can go back, because if I'm walking on a trail in a marsh and it's all ducky, I'll think about killing those ducks. And I don't, and that's a different experience than someone who is, walking along and go, oh, wow, beautiful sunset. Look at this, pickleweed, or, it's
well, one person is an observer and one person is a participant, and you've become a participant in this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's, you know what? I appreciate you saying this because, as I've referenced before, right? You have like a manicure, you have a nice ring, you have, you have long hair, you have lipstick, you've got like gold earrings on, and you're talking about killing ducks. You're saying exactly the same thing that like good old boy friends of mine in Arkansas would say, that they're walking through. Now stylistically they'd be different, and they talk about like, Jada, man, that looks ducky over there, man.
Yeah.
But you're saying the same thing because you've both become these participants in these very human cycles of life and death.
That's right.
We're talking about it being violent.
Yep.
But, birth is violent.
It absolutely is. And, I just feel like this is a part of my humanity that I want to participate in. And I see, participation in that. I've always been consistent in that the work I do, with Outdoor Afro is not ever going to recenter itself to be about, hunting and angling. It's always going to be friendly, especially from a conservation perspective. It's easy to do.
Is it kind of like if someone's interested in it, you kind of can point them towards some places where they can do that?
Absolutely. Like we're not, this is not a multiple personality, exercise where, if you're part of Outdoor Afro, you can't be, it's like, it's in our policy statement that we support lawful hunting and fishing.
Okay.
It's always been there.
Okay.
I've always talked about my dad and hunting and fishing and the meaning it's had in my life. It's not been a new story. What's new is my practice. And I'll tell you, this weekend was so much more than the Black Heritage Hunt that was conceptualized out of my own renewal as a hunter. And needing to have a lot of mentorship. You can't walk on, as a hunter.
Yeah, it's hard.
In California especially, where we've got regulations today that didn't even exist when my dad was hunting.
Yeah, I was struck with the rules around ammunition and guns and all that. It's different than where I live for sure.
Absolutely. And so there was a lot that I had to learn. And then once you learn, how do you find a community of practice? And because I do what I do for a living, I understand the power of finding your community, finding your people, and how effective it is. So naturally I turned to a group that I'd been eyeing for some years and had a couple of false starts with, and then finally landed in connection with Holly Heiser, who has been an educator in the new adult hunter space, specifically as it relates to women. And so she
works for Cal Waterfowl.
Yeah. So she also worked for California Waterfowl Association, who had been sponsoring a program called Becoming an Outdoors Woman for some time. And so I had actually found out about California Waterfowl and, of course, Holly through Becoming an Outdoors Woman. And I saw their videos. I was like, oh my gosh, this looks so amazing, all the things they get to do. And I really saw myself as an outdoors woman, but not fully realized. And, my dad had long passed away, uncles all gone, and there really wasn't a community of practice in my family anymore. And there hadn't been in a long time. And now I understand why, because, hunting is a lot of work, and the hunting my dad did, he did with his brothers. They'd all go out, it was a big family affair when we would harvest animals. Everybody had a part to play. And so by the time I kind of lost interest in going to the ranch in my teens, it was right around the time when their health started to really decline, and they were even more advanced in age. So I wanted to get back into it. And so finding this group led me to Holly. She'd done a YouTube video on how to hunt doves, and it's as a great, way to get, into hunting. And I reached out to her, and we had a great conversation. She'd recently heard me on another podcast, and she'd meant to connect with me anyway. And we just hit it off from the beginning. And we didn't, sometimes people like this weekend are assigned a mentor. Okay, so you come in, participant, and this is your mentor. It didn't happen that way with us. It was more like the way it works when you fall in love with somebody. Okay, where you just like, you're hanging out, and then you're like, oh my God, I like you too, and then it just kind of goes from there. And that's kind of
y'all became friends.
Yeah, it just, but no, it was more than friendship because, I have lots of friends, but there's a special kind of person that you trust to have around you with a firearm and killing things. Okay.
Yeah, real
not all people I will do that with. So to get to that level of intimacy with someone takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of, humility, and a willingness to be led, So she and I, we started hunting, and in this very location where we are at this club is where I shot and doubled on the first up. And, it was all a blur. Okay. There was just, birds just everywhere dropping, from the sky. And I was like, oh, and super excited. And, and we hugged, and I was just like, I love you. She was like, I love you too. It was just like, it's killing is intimate. Yeah. So here's this intersection of like, this intensity that you just killed something that gave way to also this incredible love and belonging. And that really accelerated my hunting journey. And granted, because of what I do for a living, because I have, a really expanded network now through Holly, I've had a chance to do a lot of hunting since then.
Yeah, and you've got fantastic access.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it's privileged for sure, and it's basically kind of put me on, I'd say, an accelerator course of hunting, where some people take years to do some of the things that I've done, and successfully, I've been able to just crash course it in some ways. But the thing that she and I both recognized in our journey was how much people needed mentorship, especially Black people, as it relates to hunting. And it was really great to be in the conversation on our first night where, we had the safety talk from the staff of this facility. And we talked about gun safety. But for people to talk about how they associate guns with violence on bodies. Okay. Like we're in California, the home of the drive-by.
Yeah.
My own brother was murdered by a firearm. I have any number of people I could talk to, and I bet you at least a quarter to half of them know someone who's been affected by senseless gun violence in urban and sometimes suburban situations. So I had realized when I started my hunting journey that I had more, at this time in my life, I'd had more of those influences that were affecting my attitudes and kind of fears and perceptions around firearms and guns than I had in my formative years. And so it took, of course, getting a gun in your hand, realizing how challenging and technical it is to actually shoot successfully, and all the practice that and how regulated it is and where you can go and there's so much about it that just helped me to feel less of those fears and concerns over this time. But I'll tell you, when I was in that refuge for the very first time and it was shoot time, I jumped.
Yeah,
I jumped a few times because I when you're hearing gunfire, living in a city, you hit the floor.
Get in the bathtub, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't feel that now. Now when I hear gunfire, I'm like, oh, let me look over there and see if something gonna flush my way.
Well, it depends on the situation. If you're out here, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I have, but see, I have other inputs now that are not, only about, the violence I see on TV or the violence I might experience in my family or in my community. I have more diverse inputs as it relates to firearms and killing than, just wanton and reckless violence against humans.
Yeah. And so you put together this hunt. I think there was 4 new hunters.
Yep. And Patrick, your friend.
Yeah, Patrick, who's hunted for longer than I have, and he was like an internet friend, and talked to him on the phone a bunch. And that was a blast too, because me and him hunted together. And
I love that. That was so great.
And what was cool we talked about today, and I think I already told you, but Patrick is country, and I love it.
I love it too.
I mean, he's country. I'm used to kind of being like the countryest black person around. And
no, he beat you.
Oh, deep.
Yeah,
deep.
and we loved every bit of it.
I mean, he had like a big chaw on his lip, and
yeah, like even we took the group picture, and he wasn't here when we took the group picture, and he like comes back, and we're like, yeah, you missed the group picture and everything. He was like, yeah, I was out. I was out. Like,
yeah, he just went and did his thing.
And I love it, and I never want to create a space where people feel like, oh my God, I got to be here at this time and that. I mean, I like structure so that people know what to expect. But if you got to go and get your skull or whatever the heck, I'm nobody's mom. And so this weekend was really about taking the bits of what I learned from Outdoor Afro about what it means to welcome people, and how it really felt like Outdoor Afro 2012 to me this weekend, because it was me and a few people going out on hikes, and I would partner with an outdoor educator, partner with an Audubon society, and we would go. I could show you pictures. We would go on a bird walk in the Martin Luther King Jr. shoreline, beautiful wetland area, and go and do bird ID and and have a cookout or something like that. And so in those early days, that's what it looked like. It looked like a few people, and we would be learning and bonding, and we would have experts who were ornithologists come in and help us to learn bird ID. And so like this weekend was like a flip of it. It was kind of like, this is what that looked like, but it's obviously better resourced because I'm better resourced. Yeah. Back then I didn't have the relationships and staff and,
Yeah, this place is, I have no idea what it cost to buy, multi millions of dollars. It's got a helicopter pad on it. It's gnarly.
Yeah.
And 4 black hunters had their first duck hunts here.
Yeah. And you know what? Because that's what really any new hunter should feel entitled to have. I get so annoyed when it's time for black people to do something for ourselves, for one another. It's like we got to talk about, the cheap shit. We got to talk about the bargain basement. We got to talk about, oh Lord, the low income communities of color. Like somebody actually got at me on social media when they saw the price, because this was not a free trip. Let's be clear. Everyone paid to be a participant. The volunteers were given swag. You're blessed to have the resources to allocate, swag as some form of thank you for the incredible time and commitment that these folks gave us during a peak hunting season. And, the expectation, was not to make money, but to really, it's very important that we demonstrate early that things cost. And I would do a disservice to anybody if I made everything free. And then they get out in the real world and no, that's a $2,500 hunt.
Yeah.
Because that's what, I mean, I've now hunted enough to see, you can hunt public land and thank goodness for it. But if you want to go to a club and have a guide and get on a buck or an antelope or whatever,
It's four figures.
and have meals and overnight accommodations.
Yeah.
That's not free,
Yeah.
And so, but I did set the price point at what I felt was kind of,
It was accessible.
This is a new thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to, really, stick it to people, but I really wanted to make sure that we are evaluating the experience appropriately and not making, it be, cheap or free, because also I think people don't value it in the same way either.
Well, this was not a charitable enterprise.
No.
This was an opportunity for some folks to try something new and admittedly difficult with some of the barriers to entry removed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's different. And we
don't see enough of that.
Well, and it's not, you know what it is? It's infinitely more respectful, because there's kind of an idea, and you see it a lot now. There's this idea, one, of black people being presented with the outdoors as something that they have no relationship to or has not been theirs to begin with. And then there's also this, and even if it is well-meaning, it's still patronizing, this idea that Black American is analogous to impoverished.
Oh yeah, I have been boxing out of that corner from the very beginning of Outdoor Afro. I remember somebody introduced me one time. They were like, "Oh, yeah, Rue does Outdoor Afro, and she's taking children from the hood." And I was like, "Where did you hear that? Like, who told you that?" And it was just like, but that's the, and that is like the mainstream environmental narrative that's been the play, and that's why you have a conservation movement and environmental movement that looks the way it does.
Yeah.
Is because they play to poor and not to the empowered of communities.
You're introducing this to people who have an ability and economic and social access ability to replicate this experience and actually become hunters.
Yeah.
It's like that whole idea of like taking kids from the hood on a camping trip. Like,
it makes for great, copy and, and I know, people, but ultimately it's just super selfish, It's just like, yeah, you're there for your ego. You're there because it makes you feel good.
Kind of missionary mindset.
It is. And also, it's a non-threatening population. You don't want to deal with that child's daddy who's tatted up and might have just came out the pen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, really, but that's what the child's going to go home to. And that parent, if they don't have the tools or the, or awareness of what their child's doing during a school day field trip or weekend overnight camp trip, then that's not going to be replicated back at home.
And if they don't have a relationship with that activity, then it's just a one-off thing.
Always. And so I've really been working hard. There was a phase of my career where I was doing what I call field building, where I was just going out and doing speaking engagements and just like shutting it down. Every time, Q&A would always come the same questions. How can I get more Black people and more Black kids to come to my program? I mean, it's just like, I call it thirsty for diversity, because it's just, it's meaningless, without relationships. Yeah. And for me, I have found so much happens when you get people together and they're able to build. So let's talk about what you said earlier. You were saying that, what I'm sharing sounds a lot like people who stylistically appear different than I do and who are living in another part of the country. That is become also, I wouldn't say like my heritage connections, my connections to my dad. I'd say that's in the center, alongside the humility that you get out of hunting, where you're allowed to be a beginner again and again and again and again and again. You know, you get to a certain age and you're like kind of good at a lot of stuff. Okay. You're probably a good enough cook. You're probably good enough, you know, with whatever it is that you've been doing all this time. You're probably pretty good at it. But hunting was kind of this non sequitur, and where I was like, whoop, I'm not good. So I can't come in and know that if I study this test in a certain way, that I'm going to get an A. You know, there's no linear quality in that way with hunting. There's, you know, all these lines that go in many directions about that have to do with some of your ability and your equipment, the conditions, location, and whatever the hell the animal's going to do. So there's just so much that has to all work together to actually be executed as intended. And I have found that when I leave the state and I go to a place like Lander, Wyoming, Buffalo, Wyoming, Colby, Kansas, I'm adding new states to my places visited because of hunting. And in those places, there are people there who don't look like me. Not a one. Okay. Who probably wouldn't vote, you know, the same as I've traditionally voted. But I tell you, you know, when I was, so I shot my buck, my very first buck. It was 8-pointer. I shot him after on the third day, that's my 6th sit. And it was the last 5 minutes of shoot time. And I was 200 yards away. And I shot him. And he face planted. And then it was all, you know, chaos, you know, and very dark, you know, all of a sudden. And I'm walking with my guide, you know, who's about maybe early 30s, you know. And he let on enough for me to know that, you know, he and I had probably very different, you know, political backgrounds. We didn't dig into it, you know, but we weren't there to do that.
Yeah.
But you know, we couldn't find the deer, you know, from where we were. So he's glassing, but there's logs everywhere. It's dark, you know, chaos had just ensued.
Is it like a cutover or something?
It was a little forest, a little stand of trees, in a ranch, land area, private property. So he didn't see it, and so we're walking, he's glassing, and then he stops, and he turns to me, and he's got this 1,000-megabyte smile, and he hugs me, and I start crying because he saw my buck on the ground finally, you know, and that moment we had, you know, made possible by hunting.
Yeah.
That would not have, what would have put us two together all that time, and to experience that moment, you know, of pure joy and bliss and success. And so
human connection.
Yes. God, we need more of that now. So here we are today in 2021, and everyone's just so trigger happy, you know, to, you know, release their outrage about everything. Okay? That's like the most accessible emotion right now I'm seeing in the world. And I've always been consistent that the work I do and that I will always do, it's a love story. Okay. Even when people try and like say things like, yeah, Rue, we need people like you fighting for our parks. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, who's fighting for parks? Like, it's just such a, like this, we love parks. We love them. We do this because we love it. Like, let's make that love of what we do be the first thing we think about versus the fight or the who we gotta hate in order to keep what we got, you know. So in this binary time we find ourselves in, I am so thankful to be a part of the hunting community that has embraced me and has, you know, I can be in a room and I can tell if I'm experiencing being different, right? Like, because I'm different. I'm from California. There's a lot of things about me that are different, you know? And being different, being a black woman, right? Being a black woman hunter, okay? There's some natural curiosity that goes with that.
Sure.
Big margin of understanding for that. But feeling racism assigned to me has not come up, where I feel like, you know, I sit down and people get up and walk out or change their you know, their seat, or, you know, or go quiet when I come in the room. You know, and it's really interesting. I've probably experienced more of that here in California than I have in the many experiences I've had being in the South, visiting the South, but in particular in the hunting world that I find myself in, because of the specificity of the focus and how people really we can rally around, you know, this common interest that we want to protect and we want to keep doing and keep enjoying, you know, not just the sport of it, but, you know, all the through line all the way to the table, you know. And so I feel like this weekend for me was a showcase of what's possible. Because even though we're the Black Heritage Hunt, you know, and Outdoor Afro is Outdoor Afro.
I'm glad you're saying this. Yeah.
Okay. You know, affinity groups are important. I love affinity groups. I think it's important for there to be affinity groups. Sometimes when I see an all white male thing, I'm like, go on over there and be all white male. Go on. Yeah. You know, I don't need to be a part of it, you know, or, you know, you're a black sorority of which I'm a part. It's great. I love it. When you find your people, you know, there's something really, you know, great to connect. But I think what happens too often is that it tips into radicalism. And then once that happens, then it becomes something else.
Yeah.
And I've been very careful to, you know, be specific, but not exclusive, so that we can talk unapologetically about, you know, why we love the outdoors, why we're focused on the Black culture and heritage in the outdoors, but it's not exclusive. And I find that specificity has actually made us more accessible and universal to people, because they can locate us on a map, you know. And what I find, to your point, is that people find often more that they have in common than what is different. And in the example of someone like Holly, my mentor, who co-hosted this weekend with me, when you are that specific and you're showing up, you know, with love, you know, it actually attracts people to want to support it. Yeah. And so we'll find, you know, even though we do what we do and we know who we're doing it for, we get the kind of support from everybody who just, I mean, I was at my board meeting and it was just so beautiful, like hearing these white men and women, you know, we have a very diverse board, talking about Black joy, you know.
Yeah.
And how it's like, yeah. And then this is, you know, and I was just like, yes, more of this.
Well, and it not being like a threatening concept. So like this hunt, there's like, I don't know, there's probably like 14 people here. There were men. It was actually one of the more truthfully diverse enterprises I've been on. So there were.
Well, thank you. That's a compliment.
I mean, no, it was impressive, but it was done. It was completely authentic, right? Mm-hmm. So there weren't boxes being filled. It was just the people that came together, and you had Black people, and you had white people, and you had people of mixed heritage, and you had people that, you know, might be initially recognized as Asian or Latino. Mm-hmm. It was when I'll speak for myself.
And you had people who were in all the different roles, as experts, mm-hmm. as helpers, yes. as leaders. I mean, so it wasn't just like,
Yeah.
because you oftentimes too, like the diverse events still has like leadership.
There's like a power structure thing kind of in place. And yeah, this was very different. Like the two most experienced hunters on this trip were both black men, right?
Yep.
And then probably the next most experienced hunters were all women.
Yep.
Or no, okay, Andre's been hunting for a long time
Yes,
too.
Andre. Yeah.
Okay.
So 3. Yeah.
Yeah, so the most experienced hunters were black men, and then right after that were all women.
That's right.
You had at least half of the mentors were women.
That's right.
Right? And you had, I mean, there was one specific thing. You had V and Abu, so you have a 6.5 foot tall black male firefighter being led by like a 5 foot tall, Asian American woman who is like, oh man, it's rad. It's really, really
We're going to be
rad.
unpacking this trip for a minute, just so and people should know, like, we just came in hot from this. Like, we just ended this event like an hour ago. Okay.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to like get on a phone call and like talk. There's going to be little like snippets of it, and I'm going to be living it through my fiance because he was one of the.
Yeah, he killed his first ducks this time. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's been so supportive of me this whole time. And he's even gone on hunts with me and sat in the car, and waited for me at the refuge.
And he's being led into this by you. Yeah, you know what? Honestly, there's too much to go into this. I want to say to this point that I think what you establish here, and I like this journey we've gone on, this conversation, because I think, if I'm kind of like putting a summation on it, we've talked a lot about basically you being multifaceted, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like this conversation allowed you to be that, right? And it was, I think it's a good demonstration of some of the stuff that I like so much about you and I respond to so much about you. And I would kind of wrap it up on saying that this weekend, because of just the actual authentic diversity in it, it communicates a sense of, it's just kind of okay to be yourself.
Yeah.
And so you had a whole bunch of people from very disparate places with different ideas about stuff and different levels of experience and comfort and all of that. And everyone was, there's people having their own reckonings with stuff.
Yeah.
It was, and I say this a lot too, like I don't like for stuff to be precious, right? Mm-hmm. But so there is room for people that might subscribe to what I might classify as a little bit more precious, or just comfort, being comfortable with their kind of emotions. Mm-hmm. And then there was space for, the fun of some people that had hunted other places, getting to see something really cool and a different way of doing it. And nobody's experience stepped on or belittled or got in the way of anybody else's experience, which is, yeah, dude, there's a lot of stuff that in a microcosm kind of way could really be applied in a much broader sense to kind of all of our lives that would, I think, result in just everyone being able to take a breath.
Yeah.
Because shit is so tense right now and probably is going to continue to be. But real quick, if people wanted to find you, and please plug your book, because I know you have a book coming out.
Yes. So find me at Rue Mapp on Instagram. And in particular, related to hunting, you can find me on the Black Heritage Hunt. And there's also a website, blackheritagehunt.com. And I have a book coming out that I'm so thankful you'll be a part of. I was just reading your passage the other day.
Yeah, I wrote a little essay for it.
Yeah. So you're one of about 35 voices who all together are continuing this conversation, about how you can show up in your love for being who you are, but also with nature. And the book is called Nature Swagger, a celebration of Black joy in nature. And it's really lovely. It's got 5 different essays from me that introduce, every section. And each section is a call out of the spirit of the body of writers that follow. And I'm just really happy. It's going to be published by Chronicle Books. And if you're familiar with Chronicle, they make beautiful books. And so it's going to be just gorgeous. So it's going to have, just heavy visual representation and imagery that will hopefully inspire people in the same way that Outdoor Afro has inspired people, in the same way that this weekend, the Black Heritage Hunt weekend, it will inspire people. It will be there's the through line leading to this book, and my gift to the world.
I have nothing to add to that. I want Rue to speak for herself.
I gotta hitch this RV and get on down the road. It's been a long day for both of us. I know.
Yep. I gotta do some little bit more stuff and then head back to Arkansas in the morning.
Oh wow, you're leaving in the morning.
Yeah.
Holy crap! That's right, because you have this event coming up.
Yeah, I got to get back at the middle of my season. Rue, thanks a whole bunch. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in the middle of your season, especially. So I hope it was worth it.
It was, man. It was gnarly. I had a rad time, man. It really was really cool. You got me all the way over to California, which 5 years ago I said I'd never come here, and I had a blast. So thanks a bunch, Rue.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Hey, we've reached the end. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I certainly enjoyed recording it, and I'm stoked to be able to bring it to you. As always, this podcast is produced by Jonathan Wilkins and Brian Sachs. The title track music is by Dr. Bionic out of Cincinnati, Ohio. You can keep up with me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active on social media, and that's just blackduckrevival.com. We'll also be releasing hunt dates for next season, as well as starting to take bookings for fishing trips here in about a month and a half or so, into February, beginning of March. So if you'd like to know about that before it gets released on social media, you can keep track of me at blackduckrevival.com. Also, that's a great way to access some of the articles I've been writing and publishing in print and over the internet ether waves. And if you enjoy this podcast and you'd like to help out, please feel free to like, subscribe, leave a review, all that stuff at all the normal places where you get your podcast. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.